Hi Ramanand. In this episode, we wanted to talk about Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. So, what's your main takeaway from that book?
It's really a tough question to ask one single takeaway. I would say that it opened my eyes to something called as System 1 and System 2. Harish, what is the color of your shirt that you're wearing?
Let me think. Green.
Okay, that's correct. And what is 48 into 52?
Oh man, this is. I'll have to do 50 minus 2 into 50 plus 2.
Okay, let's stop you right there. In some sense, we just demonstrated System 1 and System 2. System 1 is intuitive. Some answer pops into your head when you're asked these questions. You make decisions on the spur of the moment. The System 2 is more deliberative, more reflective. It will, in certain cases, that's the best tool that you can apply. And I think our brain, I don't think this, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky have actually shown that our brain can be seen as consisting of these two very different systems. So that was my main takeaway, and everything else flows from that. So what did you make of Thinking Fast and Slow when you first read it?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was that this seems to be like the mothership research from which so many different works have actually given their inspiration, and fundamental research has actually come from these experiments that these two gentlemen did. So that was one big thing, just reading about the source of all the other derived works that we've read. So the other thing that struck me was how people remember the peak and ends actually of any experience. If you ask me about a vacation, I won't remember what exactly happened through the vacation, but I will remember the best part of that vacation, how it started and how it ended. So that was one big takeaway. So have you actually used what we've learned from these books in any of our work?
Quite a bit. So anytime you are designing for humans, a lot of the lessons in Thinking Fast and Slow is something we should keep in mind. You mentioned the peaks and ends, the fact that we remember experiences very differently than from what we actually experience them. This point about peaks and ends, whenever we design some form of learning, which is over a period of time, we try and keep in mind, especially these peaks and ends. We try and design for peaks, but we definitely know there is going to be an ending. So how do you make it very memorable? It's the great place for you to do a lot of recaps in an interesting, sticky manner. And so if you start using some of the ideas that have been uncovered in the book, things like loss aversion, for instance, they help you design for humans.
And I guess this is how the whole idea of Uplevelers Toolkit and how different concepts coalesce is coming together, because we just referred to another episode that we did about Made to Stick and how these two are connected. And this is just the second episode. So I'm guessing as we keep moving on, more and more things will start coming together and start building upon each other. So what are people really missing because they don't know about the ideas from Thinking Fast and Slow?
So if you had an education like we've had, mainstream education, oftentimes there is no place for what you can think of as the non-rational, and deliberately not using the word irrational, because as their research shows us, there is the rational side, the calculating, the deliberate, the one that will solve an equation before making a decision. But we know that all around us and throughout our lives, we make all sorts of other kinds of less deliberate, more intuitive decisions, which are not necessarily wrong. So how do you account for this? And how do you account for the fact that behavior has a huge role to play in all of these things? And sometimes it's beyond our understanding. So what you're missing is you may end up taking a very rationalist view of the world, where you fail to understand why people behave in ways that you did not expect, because you had only that one hat on. It makes you more humble, it makes you more empathetic, and it will certainly help you actually achieve better business outcomes. If you do not read or do not know the lessons of Thinking Fast and Slow, you're liable to just have the world surprise and shock you in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. And so this is funny because we assume that everyone is going to think rationally, but we give justifications for our own so-called irrational behavior. So you just have to assume that everyone is like you, and you have the answer there. And why do you consider this an important part of the Uplevelers toolkit?
So I think it is a tool to understand other humans, whether it is our colleagues, whether it is our customers. And I think if you are running a business, if you are entrepreneurial nature or you're growing up the leadership chain, you suddenly have to shed the formulaic approach to life. You have to assimilate a lot of different ideas about different humans. And like you rightly mentioned, this is like the mother lode of a lot of other ideas that have come in. And you will actually see when you read a book like Influence, you will see that it all ties back. I wanted to ask you, do you see connections to some of the books that you read, maybe, or the concepts you learned before you actually encountered thinking fast and slow?
Yeah, in fact, that's what I was saying, that some of these studies, which seem to have started from post the Second World War, right? The last 60, 70 years has been the time period in which most of these research studies have happened. A lot of them have been in parallel, and I guess in the research circles, they would have come across these research papers, and that would have triggered some other thought in another researcher and another author, and they would have taken a slightly different direction. The advantage that we have is because these people have actually put together all those ideas in one book, we can read that as a collection, and we're actually missing out on a lot of the failed experiments, the ideas that they considered, but they did not pass the process of experimentation. So we are missing out on that, but it's useful for us to read these books, which are outcomes of so many years and decades of research. And now we, from our vantage point, can actually start piecing things together, probably the way they did not.
And something like this allows us to further accelerate this kind of knowledge ahead, because if they took 50 years to put this together, we have the luxury of passing it on in 15 minutes.
Yeah. And just to answer your question, I finally got the answer. The answer to 48 into 52 is 2496. So on that note, let's end this episode and looking forward to the next one.